Smithinda, good morning, hello and welcome again to Kroeder Kroghen. And today's programme is a sort of update of the last 20 years or so in about 10 minutes available to me. And I'll also be mentioning very briefly the Cornish Language Weekend, which takes place next weekend. Well, the update is because I chanced across a passage in a book called Kroeder Kroghen, which was published in 1969 by Tormark Press Limited, written by B. Travail. And the passage reads as follows. It's about Cornwall's ancient language. That's the title of the chapter. And Mr. Travail talks about the texts still surviving in Cornish, place names and so on, and then goes on to say this. It is now possible to teach oneself or be taught the Cornish language, and perhaps recapture to some extent the idiom and the ancient sing-song speech of Cornwall's remote past. But at best, this can only be an intellectual exercise, the means of satisfying some obscure atavistic yearning on the part of the dedicated Cornish, or else a futile attempt to turn back the waves of linguistic evolution. For whatever may be done to reintroduce Cornish as a living speech on a wider scale, the attempt is doomed to failure. Now, I was intrigued by that because it was about that time that I actually started learning Cornish. And in the intervening 20 years, a lot has happened. And I'm not sure that it would be possible now for anybody to write that with any authority at all. I know it might still be an opinion held by some people, but I think generally Cornish has become to be much more widely recognised. So I tried a little experiment during the week to try it out. I literally stuck my head out the door with an arm and a hand and a microphone in the hand and accosted the nearest passer-by in Cornish to see what the reaction would be. As it happened, it was a couple of young girls, and this is how they reacted. Dida, fatla Kernewek. Ydw i o Cynfeddys, y lle fi o Coastal Kernewek, this is your lemon.
Oh no.
Hey, to Cynfeddys?
Talk to her, please.
Oh. Did you understand what I was saying?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Did you know what language I was speaking?
Cornish.
Cornish. You recognised it as Cornish?
Mm.
You don't speak any Cornish yourself?
No.
So we have at least made some little progress if at least people understand and recognise that what they hear on the street is Cornish and not some other language like Japanese or Welsh. I guess the next stage would be perhaps that people might readily recognise and even use everyday phrases like dydd da, hello, or diwgenes, diwgenahwy for more than one person, goodbye, Nadolig Lowen, happy Christmas, those sort of phrases just very occasionally. One of the reasons, of course, that Cornish didn't survive and thrive as a language like Welsh did was because Cornish never had its own full Bible. Now, the historical reasons for that are long and complicated, but interestingly enough, it's a subject that comes up in a letter written to the monthly magazine Anganas this month. Because recently, of course, an issue of stamps has been released celebrating the publication of An Bibl in Kernewek, the Bible in Welsh. And Ray Edwards from Birmingham, and who not only speaks Cornish but actually teaches Cornish, has written a long letter asking when is a Cornish Bible actually going to be produced. He talks about An Testament Newydd, the New Testament, and him wanting to help to translate that, the Kernewek, to Cornish. And the paragraph he writes goes as follows. Nanju pimp blethen Mr. Nichols, Archdruid Kembra, Archdruid of Wales, agoses than orseth in cyfran penblwydd ma. Agan barth myrdd yn Prisna dental, agoses war Radio Cornwall gans Michael Gill, o leferol bws tŵs o Trelia and Testament Newydd, the Kernewek. Mi brofius gweris gans yn Oberma, ha Trelia 12 lyfr an Testament Newydd. Yn termyn na, ffyr leferus orthif bos nebonen oth o beri wo drelians pyb lyfr aral. Ha the wir, del wadden nifer another, capar ham mark ribia trelis nanju pel. He's describing there the other testaments that have been translated. Sorry, the other parts of the Bible that have been translated. Atho wadju trelian dowdek ma miari gortos, ha gortos, ha gortos. And gortos means to wait. And the gist of Ray Edwards' letter is, why doesn't somebody now take on the responsibility of making sure that a full translation of the Bible is available in Cornish? Because he feels, and I think many people agree with him, that if that were available, it would be a significant step forward to spreading interest in the Cornish language and, more importantly, spreading its use. Well, on to a different topic now, and that is to mention very briefly again the Penzaethan Kernewek, the Cornish Language Weekend. Now, in February I spoke to Jane Ninnis, and you'll remember that she described very briefly the kind of activities that go on during the weekend.
Well, it's an opportunity for Cornish speakers to get together and have a very enjoyable weekend using Cornish in everyday activities, and also an opportunity for new people to come along and start learning.
What kind of activities are involved?
Oh, everything from treasure hunts, walks, there's a ceilidh normally on a Saturday night, games, plays, all sorts of things.
And of course, presumably most of the eating and drinking and everyday business is done in Cornish as well?
Yes, everything.
Yes. How do people who don't speak any Cornish or who have a very, very limited knowledge of Cornish, how would they fit into the weekend?
Well, we're trying this year to pair absolute beginners up with somebody with a bit more experience, so they've got somebody to keep an eye on them and make sure they're not being left out, make sure they understand things.
Because I mean, they might be reluctant to go on a Cornish language weekend, thinking that it's beyond their ability if they don't speak any Cornish or hardly any Cornish at all.
Yes, we're aware of that, so we're hoping this year we can get around that problem.
Most Cornish speakers and students are already booked, of course. They've been booked for a long time. But it is still possible, if you're a complete beginner, never spoken any Cornish before, and you're interested in going along perhaps just for one of the days, that you could go along. So very briefly, I'll just give you details again of the Penzaethan Kernewek, or Cornish Language Weekend. It's held in the Manorji Hengar, or the Hengar Manor House, near St.Ives, and it begins on the 21st, that's Thursday coming, and goes through to the 24th, the 21st to the 24th of April. If you're interested at all in going, then you can telephone Jane Ninnis on St. Austell 882 681, or write to her at 2 Railway Terrace, Grampound Road, Truro. And her name is Jane Ninnis, Ninnis. St. Austell 882 681. Next week's programme is going to be almost entirely about Richard Trevithick, because we're only a fortnight away now from Degol Trevithick, or the Trevithick celebration, Trevithick Day, which is now held in Camborne every year and has become a major feature on the Cornish calendar. Degol Trevithick a fydd Sintjes and Vleddyn Cambron de Sadorn and Degves Warnigans mis Ebro, Saturday the 30th of April. A Dresengeth fydd Lias Stalin Street on Dre, and whether fydd Ilo, Cysgerdo, Donsio, a fydd Dydd Myr rhag Trevisogion Cambron, a rhag Kernewek all Monsieur. Richard Trevithick, of course, was a very interesting character, and a little homework between now and next week's programme. I'm used to setting homework as a teacher. Perhaps you might like to find out what legend involves Richard Trevithick, a candle and a sack of coal. It's an extraordinary feat that he managed to achieve, indication of his great strength. If you know that legend, then, well, there's no prizes, so don't bother telling me. If you don't, you'll have to listen in next week, because I will give you the answer in next week's programme. Until then, I'll say to you again in Cornish, Diw gennych wy, God be with you. Diw gennych wy ol, Bisena.